of a discussion on chapter 18 where we cover graphical user interface. We talked about choices and layout and text field and text area. We're now going to spend some time on how do you lay out the user interface. And there are multiple steps. Step 1 is to make a sketch of how you want the component to look like. So for instance, if you want to create a user interface for a pizza order application, so maybe you may choose to make it look like this. Step number 2, find the grouping of the components with the same layout, and that could make a suggestion that this would be a panel. Step 3, to identify the layout for each group. And step number 4 is to group the groups together. And step number 5 is to write the code to generate the layout. All of those together represent one piece of the 3 pieces required for a good graphical interface. Number 1, you identify the components you want to use. Number 2, layout of the component, which is what this piece is talking about here in front of you. And then the step number 3 is to identify the events and write those different events. The GUI builder, most of the integrated development environments come with GUI builders. We're using NetBeans, which has its own GUI builder that allow you to use the components and click them and drag them and build them this way. Another important part of graphical user interface are menus. And you probably have used menus a lot in all the programs that you use. A frame contains a menu bar. So the menu bar is part of a frame. The menu bar contains menus, and menus contains either submenu or menu item. So in the example in front of you, you have a menu bar, and you can create a menu bar object and add it to the frame, which will add a menu bar over here. Then you create menu objects like a file menu, a font menu, and add the menus to the menu bar. And then you can add menu items, or you can add menus to the menu that you have, which creates those submenus. So in the next few slides, we go over this example, which is very similar to the example we had in the previous video when we discussed making choices by using combo box, checkbox, and option button. This one accomplished the same task but by using menus. So to add a menu item and submenu, there's an add method. So you create a JMenu item, file exit, for instance, new menu item exit, and then in the file menu you add that to a menu. So menu item is added to menu. A menu item has no submenus. Menu items generate action events. So this is where the event happens. So when you say, okay, I create a menu, if you click on a menu, it will display the menu items. If one of the items is another menu, then it will display that other menu. And when you click on a menu item, the menu item generates an action event. So if you create a listener of that action event, then you can register that to the menu item. So here, the file exit item will register in it an action listener. So this is the program. You have to organize the program. You're using separate methods: create face item, size item, and list item. Again, the main method and is now kind of standard. It creates an object of the customized frame that you created, sets the close operation on the frame, make the frame visible, and that's all. Then you create your custom frame class or type that extends JFrame, and you use the constructor to lay out your user interface and define your listeners. So here is the example goes. You create a label, put it in the center, same as the others. same as the example from previous video. Then you create the menu bar, and you add the menu bar to the frame by calling set j menu bar, and you pass to it the menu bar. Then you create a menu, and here we're creating the menu in a method and adding that to the menu bar by using the add method. Same for the font menu. And then we create like default or initial value and call the method set sample font to initialize the font with these 3 values. The file menu, it creates a menu called file, create an exit item and adds that to the menu. And the file exit item creates a menu item, has a listener. And here exit, we haven't done this before, but this is how you can end your program. From a graphical user interface, you call on the exit method from the system, system.exit. 0 is just a code. You can, sometimes when you run from the command and you get an error, it gives you error code. So if you want to exit the program with an error code, that's how you pass on the error code. Usually you will do that in a complex application. Sometimes you want to exit the program if an error happened, or you want to exit gracefully if no errors happen, and this is how this takes place. If you want to create a menu, face menu, size menu, style menu, and adding them to the font menu, and each one of those is a menu, so these are not menu items. You create face item method and pass to it multiple variables. There's a lot of modularization that is happening in this example, and it's fascinating. I advise you to spend time going through the book. The slides break it down, but if you go through the book, you see the entire code one after the other and look at all of those breaking down of the item in order to make each method has a focus. The point here is that every method should have a focus and only one single focus. And that's what the purpose of this here. And you're basically going through. Every time you're creating a menu item, you add a listener to the menu item and you specify what you want it to do. Finally, the last thing is looking at the API documentation. We have done this in class before, and this is some more example here. And this is another example that you can use. It's a fun example using another component called the slider. And in this example, you have a panel here, and you change the red and green and blue values using sliders, and the color of that panel or frame here changes accordingly. How do you know if there is a slider? Either the best thing is to look in the swing components or read on the graphics, and you will find that there is a class called JSlider. Then you ask yourself, how do I construct a JSlider? How I get notified when the user move it? How I tell which value? And this is all in the documentation. There is a demo in the Swingset, which comes if you download the Java example, that shows lots of sliders and different forms for different sliders. And here are values here. And you can go through this. It's nice steps. A slider has a change event, by the way, that has a method called state change. So there's a change listener instead of an action listener that has a method called the state changed. And to get the value of the slider, there's a method called the get value, which gives you the current value of the slider. Here is the layout. Here are the classes. Here is your main program. And that concludes our discussion of Chapter 18, the Graphical User Interface. And if you have any questions, send me an email. Thank you.